Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield audio podcast.
I want to talk to you today about religious persecution. And I want to talk to you about a people group who are being persecuted religiously who might surprise you. Religious persecution has always happened throughout history. We all know that religious minorities have been persecuted by religious majorities. That has been the method or the manner of mankind all through history. What's interesting today is that there's a kind of massive religious persecution going on. And most people of that religion, particularly in America, are completely unaware of it. It's going to surprise you to hear that the most persecuted religious group in the world today is not Mormons, it's not Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not, Yazidis in Iraq, it's not other break-off groups. Believe it or not, the most persecuted religious group in the world today are Christians. It's the Christian church. Now, that I know is going to be astonishing to many of you, but this is so substantiated, it's not even funny. And the reason that we don't know it, the reason that it's not widely discussed, is that media is driven by what's of interest to people in the West, particularly in America. And most American Christians are completely oblivious of any kind of religious persecution that's going on. Oh, occasionally we'll hear about maybe a Christian church bombed in the Middle East, or a Christian pastor shot somewhere, and it's a tragedy, and maybe we pray about it in church. But we don't know enough about the world in the American church. We don't know enough about the state of the church worldwide to know that this is a massive trend, and that the number of Christians killed every year, the number of Christians persecuted worldwide, the number of nations in which Christians are persecuted is at an astonishing high. Listen to this for just a moment. Between 200 million and 230 million Christians daily face threats of murder, beating, imprisonment, and torture, and a further 350 to 400 million encounter discrimination in areas such as jobs and housing. In fact, a conservative estimate of the number of Christians killed for their faith each year is somewhere around 150,000. I want you to think about that for just a moment. 150,000 Christians are killed worldwide every year, and most people in America do not know it. Now, before I go any further, because I am going to quote some more stats, let me tell you that the source for these statistics is the Pew Forum. Now, I really like the Pew Forum. It is absolutely not a Christian organization. It's absolutely not a conservative organization. It's a research firm, and if anything, it leans slightly left of center. But I like that because, first of all, it means that I'm not just quoting from the folks who might be my natural tribe, conservatives and Christians. And also they are amongst the most substantiated researchers. They really are factual. They really are respected. And so you'll find this on the Pew Forum. You can do a simple Google search for Pew Forum, P-E-W, and then separate word forum, and then comma, persecution of Christians. And all these stats that I've just mentioned will come up. But it is an unbelievable trend, and largely it is a result of the fact that Islam has turned more radically against the West, and therefore against the religion of the West, which of course they identify as Christianity. Most of the Christians being persecuted in the world are being persecuted by Muslim forces. Here's another quote from the Pew Forum study of religious persecution of Christians. It says, altogether, Christians face some form of harassment in 2/3 of all countries, or 133 nations. And Muslims also face some substantial harassment in the West, but most of the persecution of Christians is being done in Muslim-dominated countries. The Pew Forum also said Christians face harassment in more countries than any other religious group. And one of their concluding statements is, put in sharper focus, at least 75% of all religious persecution in the world is directed against Christians. Now, this was at a conference on religious persecution, which the Pew Forum took part in and helped sponsor. So My point in bringing this to your attention is that almost everybody who listens to my podcast is a person of faith in some form. I have people of a wide variety of faiths, and I'm sure the majority, statistical majority, 50-60% are Christians. And I think it's important that we know about religious persecution happening anywhere in the world. A trend of this size is absolutely astonishing. And I don't think it's a statement of bitterness for me to say that if this was a persecution of Mormons, if this was a persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses, if this was a persecution of some other minority group, I think we would have paid more attention to it. But since it's a persecution of Christians, I think we are less aware of it because the Christian church is so large. And then, as I say, the Christian church in the West is largely ignorant of this. I strongly recommend that every church that's represented by a listener of this podcast, that those of you who are listening, go to your pastor, go to your church, recommend that they keep tabs and talk about from the pulpit the persecution of Christians. Recommend that they put it in their bulletins or their announcement sheets. Recommend that they have prayer times for the martyrs around the world. Maybe occasionally show the face of somebody who's killed. The idea is not to generate anger or fear. The idea is to create awareness. And then I know I have a lot of politicians who listen to this podcast. Let's make contact with the State Department. Let's make contact with Freedom Watch and Voice of the Martyrs and organizations like that pay attention to these things and serve these issues. I've been involved in some religious persecution issues in the Middle East, in Iraq about a decade ago, and we went to the State Department. We went to the White House. We talked to congressmen and senators. We even ended up going to the Vatican. And pressing an issue there, and found wonderful response, and eventually the situation was in fact changed. Pastors that I knew were shot, people who ran bookstores were killed. It was a serious issue. But we found that if we made an intelligent case, if we brought it to the attention of people who didn't know it, that they were responsive. So we've got 150,000 Christian brothers and sisters being killed around the world every year. We've got, on this date, just today as I'm speaking, we've got 230 million Christians facing murder, beatings, imprisonment, and torture. And we've got almost 400 million who are discriminated in some other way, such as jobs and housing. 400 million people. Now, I don't guess I need to tell you that's larger than the population of the United States. So a group of people, larger or approximately the population of the U.S. worldwide, are being horribly persecuted, and 150,000 of them killed every single year. It's an astonishing trend. It's an astonishing fact. And a lot of what allows this to go on is the ignorance of it in the Western world. I urge you to log on to Voice of the Martyrs. I urge you to log on to Pew Forum. I urge you to log on to Freedom Watch and other organizations that pay attention to these things. Even Amnesty International pays attention to these issues of religious persecution of Christians, even though Amnesty International is not an organization most Christians are very fond of. And I think that we should, get their email blasts, pay attention to these issues, and begin to address these matters with our congressmen, our senators, and of course, those who work in D.C., take them up with the State Department and the Foreign Affairs Committee and things of that nature. It's an important issue. It's one of the defining issues of our time. And here's the final statistic I want you to know. These numbers are rising by about 25% every year, which means that over the next decade, astonishing atrocities are going to be committed unless we begin to make our voices heard.
This Stephen Mansfield podcast was brought to you by the Mansfield Group. Find us at mansfieldgroup.com.